are the factors shifting the aggregate demand curve. So the mechanism described indicate why Keynesian analysis suggests that changes in the money supply shift the aggregate demand curve. Now suppose for a given price level, a rise in the money supply causes the real money supply to increase. Suppose if P is constant and if we are increasing the supply of money, so M will increase. For a given price level, a rise in the money supply causes the real money supply to increase, which leads to an increase in aggregate demand. What will happen? Aggregate demand will increase. So an increase in the money supply shifts the aggregate demand curve to the right. So very simply look at from this relationship. P is constant. Suppose P is constant and we are increasing M. If M increases, it means M over P also increases. And if this value is increasing, it means I is decreasing. So investment and net exports both will rise in relation to a lower interest rate. What will happen? Aggregate demand will increase. So if aggregate demand increases, it means the aggregate demand curve shifts from the original position to the right side. The aggregate demand 2 is now to the right hand side of the aggregate demand 1. I mean to say that AD1 will shift to the right, keeping the price level constant. When initially we were at point B, and if we increase the supply of money further, we will move from point B to point B dash, and similarly from C to point C dash. So in a conclusion, I can say that an increase in the money supply shifts the aggregate demand curve to the right. And similarly, a decline in the money supply shifts the aggregate demand curve to the left. Keynesian believe that there are other factors affecting the aggregate demand. What are the other factors? Number one, manipulation of government spending and taxes, changes in net exports, changes in consumer spending, changes in business spending. These are the most important causes of shifts in the aggregate demand curve. The question is how? If, for example, consumer spending increases, or if government spending rises, or if tax rate rise, how these changes will affect the position of the aggregate demand curve. For example, if the government spends more, I mean to say if government spending rises, if G rises, or if net exports increase, NX increase, so aggregate demand rises and the aggregate demand curve shifts the original position to the right. Or simply you can see here, if C increases, consumer spending increases, or if government spending increases, or government taxes decreases, look at here, decreases, or net exports increases. How these factors will affect the aggregate demand? So very simply, aggregate demand will rise, or simply we can say that the nominal value of aggregate output will rise. So aggregate demand shifts to the right side. And if suppose C decreases, G decreases, T increases, NX decreases, YAD will decrease. If YAD is decreasing, it means Y is decreasing as well. So the aggregate demand curve will shift to the left. Consumer spending, government spending, taxes, net exports, investment spending, these are the most important factors affecting the position of the aggregate demand when we are talking about the Keynesian view. So what is the difference? Very simply, monetarists are of the view that changes in the money supply can shift the aggregate demand, This was the only source of change of position of the aggregate demand when we discuss the monetarist view. But when we discuss the Keynesian view, so consumption expenditures, government spending, government taxes, net exports, business spendings, these are the most important factors shifting the aggregate demand curve from the original position.